Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. Hi everybody, welcome to Property People. Today I am joined by Daragh McLoughney. Daragh is the Director of MCL Architecture. He's from Ireland, a multidisciplined designer able to combine aesthetics and technical expertise to create really awesome results on property designs, architecture and development. So thank you for joining us today, Daragh. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me. It's great, great to find you on this.
Good. Well, we've been talking for some time. I know your wonderful wife, Laura, as well, also in the development game. I actually met her first, but we've been connecting over the last 6 to 12 months or so, even more so than previously, talking about everything from design and development and architecture. Now, where I always like to start with everybody is, were you always wanting to get into architecture at school? Is that what you were kind of growing up to be when you were kind of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15?
You know what? I was really lucky in that respect as well, because, well, some of my mates still don't know what they want to do, but I was quite lucky from early on. I was always good at drawing, always into art, and I wasn't bad at maths and those kind of things as well. So I always knew that I wanted to do something kind of artistic, or, basically with a pen in my hands and drawing something. And it was actually my stepmother who put me onto it. So she was like, why don't you get into architecture? I was pretty young at the time, maybe about 12, 13. And then once I started looking into it a bit more and kind of appreciating, the impact of the built environment, it's something that we experience on a daily basis, but also looking at the things that, excite you, draw you in, things that inspire you about buildings. I just kind of got more and more into architecture and building design. And then, basically when I got to, in Ireland, we do the leaving cert similar to the A levels. It's quite a difficult exam though, but already at that stage, I knew the course that I needed to get into, what I wanted to do. So I was able to drop certain subjects that didn't suit me, like the languages took a bit of a hit. So I'm pretty open to languages now, but at least the technical drawings, not so bad. So, but yeah, to answer your question, from an early age, I knew this is what I wanted to get into and really focused on it. So I'm quite lucky like that. I'm very, very thankful.
And at school, were you like straight A's, or were you, like average, but you were just really good at art and design and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
or were you kind of like top of everything?
I was pretty good at school. I mean, I wasn't like, I was a bit of a messer. I did get in a bit of trouble, but when it came to exams and stuff like that, and studying, I really put the head down. I forget, I probably got some words of wisdom at some point along the way, but I appreciated that, school, that bit of investing that time at that stage of your life will pay off in the long run. So yeah, I'm sounding very sensible at a young age, but I was really a bit of an idiot. I just got
lucky. Well, because one of the things, I think how people grow up really helps mold what they end up doing and how successful they are. I think there's a lot to say for it anyway. And one of my earlier memories, I must have been about 10 or 11 years old. I'd gone with my parents on a holiday to Barcelona, and I saw these beautiful buildings by Antonio Gaudi. And I was like, wow, these are amazing. Imagine living in one of these kinds of places. And unfortunately, I was really, really bad at art and design. I'm creativity wise, picturing something. I still barely draw a straight line. But that was one of the things that inspired me to get into property, because I was like, wow, you can really design these cool buildings. But I just knew from an early age, definitely I wouldn't be into architecture, or I wouldn't be an architect rather. But I am very much into architecture. In terms of kind of role models and people that you might have picked up a book or that inspired you, design, you could do product design, you could do graphic design. There's somebody or something that made you look into architecture and think, I want to be a bit like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mean, the last 200 years of architecture and design have been massive. There's been so much change, so many innovators and people really leading design into completely new arenas that nobody really even thought about before. And I mean, we can even see that now with the latest on how we're going to deal with pandemics in the future and stuff like that. We can talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But as far as inspirational people, yeah, what really inspires me is that kind of mid-century modernism when that started to emerge. So kind of the pre-war years, so especially the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, there was lots of really cool architecture and art movements on the continent. And you had some just fantastic minds coming out. There was great thinkers as well in America across the Atlantic. But here you had the likes of, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, all these fantastic architects who saw that there was a new design emerging, basically responding to modern living and getting away with all this classical stuff, which had become a little bit meaningless. It all become a bit tacky with it kind of stuck on decorations. So really thinking about what machinery is now going to offer us and how that's going to impact design, thinking about layouts. I mean, there was huge inspiration taken from the Far East and Japanese design and that kind of blending of indoor and outdoor space. So modernism made this huge jump, and it was really stunning to people. And even now you look at those pavilions of, say, Van der Rohe, and they're just stunning, you know what I mean? And they could be, they're timeless essentially. When you get that really good modernism right, it can be it's just timeless, So I think those kind of people really inspired me. Let's see, some other ones like Richard Neutra as well. All of these architects and designers, unfortunately, they all had to flee to the States once the Third Reich took over. So you got this big brain drain from Europe, unfortunately,
Right.
They all went to the States. But as a result, in the States then, especially in California and the West Coast, they were really allowed to kind of develop those ideas. And yeah, it was just a really exciting time. And anytime I read books or shows, or look at shows of that time, it just really inspires me because everybody's got, a kind of message to get out of them. Yeah, so in a long waffly way, that's a kind of
yeah. I
inspiration.
mean, that's amazing, and just to hear that you've got all of these people at the forefront of your mind that you can feed off, because I truly believe in things like standing on the shoulders of giants, looking back at things like science is a very good example of that, where you can see back into the past of how things were done, and you become the evolution of all of that, and trying to build on all of the way that they've improved stuff, and you take it that next step further. So in terms of the architect role, how would you best describe the role of an architect in land planning, design, development?
Interesting. Yeah, it's without getting too carried away, I suppose it's the person who kind of pulls together the design is the critical part. And I mean, there's lots of elements there you've got to pull together. So I mean, obviously you have to think about the commercial aspect of it. I mean, dealing with property developers like yourself, if I came along and just proposed a big Mies van der Rohe pavilion and be like, hang on, that's not super.
It happens
so you
sometimes.
Yeah, it might be sometimes, exactly. But it's knowing the kind of commercial aspect about it. I think that's almost one of the first and foremost things, because that's going to dictate or guide you in the design. So it's that understanding what the client is after, understanding what the end user is going to be like, and how the end user is going to interface with the building is very important as well. The lifetime of it, the materials, just the functionality of it. So there's a lot of aspects there you're going to have to pull together. And I suppose as an architect, that's really the kind of crucial role. It's understanding that you are in charge of the design, and if there's any part, okay, so I don't know everything about structural engineering, but I know that I need to coordinate that and make sure that the structure works with the aesthetic design or the overall design that we're trying to achieve. So it's also a case of kind of knowing, what is this again? It's knowing a little about a lot. Like basically specialists know a lot about little. Architects need to know a little about a lot. So you need to kind of cover all your bases and be able to pull it all together. I don't need to know everything about how mechanical engineering works, but I need to know that you need to cool and ventilate a building, and you need to allow space for it. Where does it go, etc.? How's that going to impact on the design? So it's pulling everyone together really in a
Because
another long waffly way of responding.
No, that totally makes sense. It is, because that's actually one of the most common things that I hear on building sites when we're talking to builders is, the architect, it always works on paper, it never works in real life. And they're always complaining that, and I'm like, look, these are measured drawings, these should be perfect. And they're like, well, things. So, the functionality of, well, okay, actually, let's park the functionality for a moment. The ability to be able to understand the mechanics and electrics, to bring in the actual dimensions of and proportions of all the rooms, whether the door closes inside or outside, where the bed should go as well, because it goes into that level of detail. So we know where the TV points are going to go and the data points are going to go, and the architect does all of that on a piece of paper, and they need to understand all of those different moving parts so that it actually works. Now, some architects are very good at it from my experience and have that knowledge as you do, and some of them not so much, and there's a lot of toing and froing and then builders getting a little bit angry. But in terms of, I think that's exactly what an architect does. They take all of those ideas, and on different drawings they will bring all of those things to life on a piece of paper, and then it's down to everybody else to actually make it practical.
And I think if I could just interject quickly there, Sad, with drawings as well, and I say this to the juniors in the office as well, is that drawings are our means of communication. It's not the ends in themselves. We're not in the business of just creating drawings, we're in the business of creating buildings. So that's what I always say, is that drawings, they have to be clear, but they have to communicate a purpose. They're not an end in themselves. So I'm always getting the juniors to think about, how that exists in a 3D space. How is that going to interfere with everything else going on? And I think, unfortunately, you get too bogged down, especially in 2D stuff, and you can really miss, mistakes can happen, which is obviously a real pain, but maybe even more of a shame is you can miss real opportunity to create, whatever it is, that real volume of space that gives you that kind of inspired feeling when you walk into a foyer, or if we're talking about residential, that mezzanine level or something like that, that's going to give you the brilliant outlook over your entertaining space. So it's really thinking about how that space is going to exist in a 3D environment, and not getting too focused down on drawings. So sorry.
I completely agree with that. And actually, this whole thing is all about sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions. And one of the problems that I see in the property world and development world, especially related to architecture and architects, is the fact that everything is done on a 2D drawing, and not enough is brought into 3D. I mean, to create a 3D CGI and that kind of thing, they say it's huge. I mean, it's usually quite costly, which is, I think, a real shame. And there would be a great opportunity, a great solution to try and create. So, for example, a recent project that I've just done, the rear room, it's it's the smallest of the house, but it has this beautiful potential to have a vaulted ceiling in there. And that doesn't come in on the drawings, and it's always an extra that we have to make sure that we tell the builder, because it's not on the drawings, because the architect hasn't been able to see it because they're doing everything else drawing. If they were able to cheaply created, cost-effectively created 3D drawings, is there any technology like that? Does that exist? Is that in the new?
Massive. There's tons of them. So again, it's the kind of level and the detail of the 3D that you want to go into. So, I mean, one of the big software's changes going on at the moment, it's been going on for a while now, is BIM, Building Information Modeling. So this is essentially changing the way architects and all designers, engineers included, work on drawings. Rather than working on a set of 2D drawings, essentially we work on a model, a 3D model that's stored out somewhere. So I come in and I design the facade and interiors, blah, 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 whatever else. That feeds onto the model, this like centrally stored model, and then the engineer would come in, do their structure. So what's great about it is that it really cuts down on any potential clashes. It makes sure that that coordination and that interface is spot on, because straight away you can see that if an engineer's beam is intersecting your your ventilation duct, you see that straight away. So that's quite an involved level of 3D, because they generate the full working drawings from that. So you wouldn't do that at the outset of a project when you're just looking at massing and kind of the overall size of it. So that's really for the working drawing stage. But you've got lots of cool programs, like, I mean, SketchUp, the Google SketchUp, which has been, it's not free anymore, but it's been free for a long time. It's such a simple and great program, really easy to use, real intuitive. And we do SketchUp models for all our projects. So whenever we're going for planning, again, when you're going for planning particularly, it's about communicating the scheme, communicating the design, communicating the merits of it. And I think if you're just focused on 2D drawings, you're missing an opportunity there. Yeah. So we always generate 3D models. What that can show is views from the surrounding context, how it's going to impact on the neighbors. And as you said, then it identifies opportunity, where you might have that vaulted ceiling or whatever it is, or that extra bit of height, and it could come down. You could be losing out on, a bit of money there as far as getting that extra extension to a unit or extra unit in itself, whatever.
I mean, yeah, if you can get a mezzanine level in, or you can get a little bit more wow factor in a room, that's kind of an increased selling point, or that extra perception of space at least. That's always handy. So it's good to know that these tools are out there. Yeah. In terms of another question that I had, functionality and aesthetics. Yep. It was funny you just mentioned actually the old-fashioned architecture where they were just trimming everything and kind of putting fancy little frills on everywhere, as if that was maybe aesthetically pleasing, but functionally, how is that space working? And actually that brings us a little bit into the whole COVID-19 current debate of where architecture is going to go, where the trends are going to go, in terms of people needing to work from home. Are they going to need more workspace? Are they going to need to have a parking space because they're going to be parking at the tube station, going into town twice? I mean, how functionality versus aesthetics? Yeah, focused on that part of the question, though. How do you balance out the two?
Well, basically, they should balance themselves. I think one feeds into the other, and I think if you go down too far down one road, it becomes an unbalanced project, like the functionality and the aesthetics should align. I think if you're too far, if you're all focused on creating some beautiful, stunning building, but you're forgetting about, how somebody's going to use that on a daily basis. And especially, as you said, now we're kind of demanding more flexibility from our homes. If we lose sight of that, well, then you're creating a shoddy product basically. So I think like most things, I mean, it's the same thing of like kind of structure and aesthetics. They almost have to evolve at the same time. Chicken and egg job a little bit, but they're kind of like, mutually arising at the same time. So I don't think one should outweigh the other whatsoever at all. I think they should feed into each other. And I suppose that ties into what I was talking about earlier about modernism as well. Yeah. That functionality becomes the aesthetics of the project, you know what I mean? By having that, well, if we're just talking about materials, and I suppose, maybe copper and cork and materials that are antibacterial, we're going to be seeing a lot more of those, but basically using those materials, having the aesthetic quality of those on show. So, copper is a beautiful material. Using that in the right locations with the right scale and forms and stuff like that, that can add incredible aesthetics and then provide you with your functionality as well, So I don't think you sacrifice one for the other. They're essentially interwoven.
Yeah, so that totally makes sense. And I think that, again, having a profound understanding of the two and making them meet in the middle is, and having them at equilibrium is incredibly important to get the optimum result when you're just trying to design something. So in terms of because then you add the other thing, which is the commercial element to make it cost effective. So you can have something really, really, functional. It's got the outdoor space. It comes with the parking space. And it's aesthetically, design is like one of the best design, award-winning design. But then, oh, wow, it's like £300 a square foot to build. So as an architect, again, from a young age, I was always told, architects, they'll draw anything, Yeah, you can't, you've got to be able to tell them what you want. Otherwise,
Yeah,
they'll draw you kind of like the Sistine Chapel when you know
yeah.
that's just not really viable on this. As much as you want something as beautiful as that, you might not be able to afford it. So, from your point of view at MCL, etc., how do you approach putting in the commercial element into the functionality and the aesthetics? How do you balance that bit?
It's kind of the same thing again. It's part of the project. It's not something that you leave behind. And I think as well, yeah, basically, unfortunately, there are that reputation that architects get a bit carried away and run away with the project. But yeah, unfortunately, you're basically losing sight of what you were there to do in the first place, and that's to understand what the client's about, understand what they're trying to achieve, looking at the site and drawing inspiration from that as well, and then trying to guide that in the best way possible. So unfortunately, those people who get too drawn down on creating some incredible design feature, that's again what I was saying earlier, that's only going to exist on paper, and we're not in the business of creating drawings, we're in the business of creating buildings. So understand what your client's about, understand what your brief is, and don't go off in a tailspin and in your own little head. You've got to listen to what's being said to you, and listen to the way people live and work, basically.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's the important thing then, really, isn't it? It's understanding the brief. If somebody
yes,
tells you I need to build this at a certain price per square foot, if you're going to
yeah,
build kind of like the shard in my back garden or something when I needed just like a 2-bedroom bungalow,
yeah,
you're going to miss a trick, and you're not going to progress with that job. It's about
exactly.
understanding exactly what you've been asked to create.
Exactly, and that's where the creativity comes into it then as well. It's like receiving this brief, say, yourself want to create 6 to 9 units, blah blah blah. This is the kind of target group I'm looking at. Young professionals. It's looking at that, looking at the site, and then adding your creativity to it. That's what clients want. They don't want you just coming in with your design hat on and I'm some type of tortured artist and going to run off. And that's again, that's you're just living in your own world then, and all you're going to be doing is creating drawings. And you're a beautiful artist. Well done. You're a great artist, but you're not in architecture. And that's the way I have to look at this.
So, when we're looking at planning,
Yes.
something that you and I have been discussing for some time,
Yeah.
and the approach to planning, the role of an architect, I think, is really, really, really important. I
Yeah.
think the idea that the architect really is able to demonstrate the vision to the planning officers and the committee, etc., is really important. Again, though, isn't it fair to say that you are almost constrained to the brief of the client and to the constraints of whatever that planning policy is? How much flexibility do you have beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you look at planning like that and purely as a kind of legislation process, it seems like it's very constrictive. And it can be, don't get me wrong, it certainly can be. But I think the key is it's to really highlight what the opportunities and the merits are of the site. So, and designing or proposing a sympathetic design. So that's looking at things like the context, the history of the area, the general architectural styles. You might go with something that borrows a bit of an architectural style from the neighboring context, or you might go something that totally contrasts it and creates this nice sort of juxtaposition. But again, it's being able to back up your claims as well, or your case. If you're going in for whatever, if you're going in for something that's sympathetic to the area, making sure that it doesn't get too pastiche and too kind of fake looking, making sure that it still is inspired by the character of the area, etc. Or if you're going in for something that's totally alien, being able to really justify that and being able to show that whatever it is on historical or social basis, that this is the right design choice. So yeah, it's funny. There is a good bit of pressure on at that point. But again, that's what we're in the business for, and I really enjoy those early concept phases when you're coming up with a kind of idea and an overall design feel and how that ties into the history of the site and everything as well. I really love that stage. Yeah, and it's like going to court. I hate to say, you got to have your case sorted. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
if you don't have a strong case, you'll be found out. Yeah, so
absolutely. Everything you're saying right now makes me think of the word kind of harmony, where everything has to come into a perfect balance, where everybody has to be pleased, whether it be planning officers, whether it be clients, whether it be the
yeah,
functionality, aesthetics, the commerciality, and you sit as an anchor trying to pull all of those different things together. That's which is not an easy job, which brings me on to a point of sometimes there are a number of developers that I know that troll through the planning applications that have gone in, and they look for inverted commas lazy planning applications, as
yeah.
in so an architect has gone, you know what, here's an easy win, I know that I can get a certain amount of units on it, it's underdeveloped effectively, the site, and then these guys go in and they find these sites and give it to a more astute architect who can really
Mhm.
squeeze an extra 2 or 3 units out of it and get a nice little planning uplift rather.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've come across regularly? Are you familiar with kind of that inverted commas lazy planning applications?
Yeah, I have seen those. Yeah. I mean, I know this is me answering the questions, but I'm interested to hear what developers think. Why is that an easy win if there's been a poor planning application in the past? I mean, if
So
anything, yeah.
yeah, so there's one that comes to mind. There was one in Watford, for example. It was
Yeah.
and I think that they'd already got it was being sold by a land agent.
Hmm.
Yeah. And these guys had seen it and said, right, wow, there's 4 units here. It looks a
Hmm.
decent deal, but I think we can go back into planning and get another 3 units.
Mm.
And
Oh, sorry,
literally,
sorry. This is approved planning. Sorry.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
So so
Absolutely.
they took that application back in through the planning process and got an extra
Yeah,
3 units. So I'm
yeah,
thinking, and they must be thinking the same thing, is like, why didn't they initially go in and get the full amount of units on
yeah.
it? Why did they have these huge one beds? It just didn't make sense.
Totally get you. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah, I do see a few of those, and it's whether it's a case of trying to get it onto the market quickly, you get an easy planning application in or something like that. But yeah, you see some, and the design is just bonkers. Either place rooms are completely oversized, or just the general outlook and amenity is really poor. And yeah, it seems to be a case of let's just get a planning permission, and that will up the value a little bit. But it's not something you would never really build out. But yeah, and then it makes sense for a lovely developer like yourself to come in and make sense of it and build out something that will actually work. Um,
Yeah, because there are some architects sometimes that don't necessarily understand to the level that you do, especially the commerciality. So they'll follow a brief and then maybe just stick to the brief, and maybe the developers miss the trick. And instead of the architect saying, you know what, actually, I think we can squeeze a little bit more out of here.
you've got to push it. You've got to push it. I mean, if you play it too safe, ugh, okay, well, again, you'll miss out on opportunity. But it's understanding what your clients are about as well. So, I mean, if you're working with developers, they're looking for that extra
Sorry,
bit of force.
we just had an intruder in the studio. Sorry about that. Just had Hannah the cat jump
The
by.
beast.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry.
Your grands. Yeah, so it's really understanding what your clients are about. So if you're looking at a site and you've identified that there's opportunity to get extra height in it, that's such a win for your client, and if you can justify that design, absolutely. So if you've been appointed as an architect to design out a scheme, and you're playing it super safe and you're not really understanding the commercial pressures that your client are under, well, look, there's plenty of really good, one-off residential designers. Maybe that's kind of, it's understanding what your clients are about. And if you're working with developers, they want to push it. So you have to push it yourself as well, but then also balance that with good design, planning policy, etc. So never kind of motto I always try to live by is, never completely say no. Understand what they're about and understand what they're trying to achieve. But at the same time, there's always a way. So
Absolutely.
it can be done. That's the motto.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
my own motto there for a second.
It's not that it can't be done. It's kind of how can it be done, and you start thinking rather than stopping thinking. And it's
Yeah.
just I think that's a simple mindset thing. I mean, I'm a firm believer that um, with architecture, some architects can and some can't. Some don't have the not only the creativity to create something that's really functional, design-wise, etc., but they don't understand the commercial element to it as well. So they won't be able to help the client, especially if they're a developer, especially if they're an investor, to really maximize whatever they're looking at. So, and it's really important. And it's one of the reasons why you and I get on really well, because I feel like you're one of the ones that can get all of that done. So,
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
sorry.
something I see a bit. Is unfortunately that kind of disconnect between, especially when you're getting planning in place and then your working drawing or technical drawing package when you're going to tender and going to site. Unfortunately, I see a lot of projects run into a difficulty then because designers or architects are too focused on the planning and either don't have the expertise or the foresight to actually convert that into a construction pack that you can properly price, understand the buildability of it, get it through building control and everything as well. So that's something that I'm very proud of that we have in-house in MCL architecture and something that we do a lot of. It's kind of like putting your money where your mouth is. If I'm going to get you planning for it, I should understand how it can be built and make sure you can deliver the information to build it out as well. So sorry to cut across you there.
No, not at all. I mean, in terms of the projects that you've worked on over the years,
Yeah.
I mean, which is your largest, or which is the most proudest project you've ever worked on from memory?
Nice one. Well, one on site at the moment is probably the one I'm most excited about. So this is one in Woking. It's a 41 unit development. Been working on this since 2017. I really like this one because it was an existing commercial building. So again, it was devising a planning strategy, which we briefly spoke about earlier before we came on this call. But we did a combination of permitted development and full planning to basically change the use into residential, and then also to add another floor in the building as well. I think the layout of it, the landscaping, and this additional floor has a lot of really cool design features in it that we can back up with, proper buildable construction details and get through building control and everything as well. So again, it's converting those lovely CGIs into something we can actually build. And it's motoring along quite nicely, be finished at the end of the year. And that's probably the one I'm most excited about, actually. Few other good ones I've finished in the last few years. There's one in Crouch Hill that we did. That was 7 units and basically a kind of landlocked site. So this was for a Wimbledon developer. He had this site for a while and tried to get a block of flats in it. All the neighbors had objected, and it was a real nightmare. They basically were stuck with the site that they thought they could do nothing with. We came in and saved the day.
Brilliant.
Managed to get 7 units on it, but it was in a conservation area as well.
Wow.
So there was that we had to balance, but got commended on our use of materials by the local heritage officer. Did a lot of canvassing with neighbors. I was able to get it through. It's just being finished, built out now. The landscaping is just getting completed, and then I'm going to get some photos taken. But that's a really nice scheme. I'm really proud of that one as well. And another one that springs to mind is one of the first projects we did, actually. Very lucky to have this as one of our first projects. There's another refurbishment and extension of an existing office building, changing it to residential. I did that in Stanmore. That was 39 units. It's over a ground floor library. And that was shortlisted for the London Construction Awards last year. So
Wow.
for Fit Out of the Year. Yeah, we were in there with the London Bridge redevelopment and everything as well. So we didn't win, but it was good to be in such a prestigious category. So they're kind of 3 of the main ones anyway. So the Woking one, I'll be entering that into a few award competitions. Quite excited about it.
The Woking one, you mentioned that it's a 41 unit, and you started in 2017. So 2017 to 2020. So tell us a bit about the timeline as to how it started then and why it's taken so long to get to where it is and to only finish by the end of next year.
Yeah, it takes a while, all right. So basically, 2017, the client came to me, said, right, I've been looking at this building. What can I do with it? So that's typically the first question. I know what they're about, and I know the kind of schemes that they like to do. So you didn't have to give me a full brief because I know what they're about. So the first, let's see, so that was kind of mid 2017. So I'd say for the first month or two, we're looking at various different options of what we can do, looking at general floor layouts, mix of 1s and 2 beds. They were going to agents then, and getting those priced up and doing their viability studies. So the first few months, it was basically all focused on layouts. We were hardly thinking anything about the exteriors or the facade or anything like that. It's like, how many units can I fit on this building? So after that point, then it was trying to buy the building. So that there was a bit of negotiation. I take a step back at that point then, and obviously provide any design information that can grease the wheels. But that took a while. They had some difficult buyer that was involved in it. Don't know all the exact ins and outs of it. But the building got bought then early 2018. And at that point then, it's just planning. So looked at the planning strategy. We split it up into, I think we had 3 or 4 planning applications on it. We had the permitted development, then we had changes to the lower floors, 3 applications altogether, changes to the lower floors, and then the application for the top floor. So they were submitted. They took a few months to be decided upon. Once we finally got planning permission through, then it was the tender process. So that's converting the planning drawings into something that the builders can price. There was quite an intensive tender process that took about another 3 or 4 months or so. Got them appointed, finally get on site. So yeah, these things, they certainly take a while. And it's funny as well, when you're, the way I organize all the projects is obviously by year. So obviously there's a few 2020 jobs we're working on at the moment, but most of our jobs are 2017 and 2018 are the main ones we've got on site at the moment. So it takes a while to get there, but that's the game, eh?
Good things come to those who can wait.
yeah.
The second project, Crouch Hill, 7 units. They'd been rejected planning before.
Yeah.
What had they gone in for to get rejected?
It was the Heist. Basically, it was just objected by all the neighbors, and because of the conservation area, officers just felt it wasn't paying respect to the context, surrounding area, etc. And of course, as a developer, they're trying to get as much mass and scale on it as possible, and they just hit complete loggerhead. And they were at a bit of a loss. All right, it was one of those that when I got appointed, I was all really excited and coming up with lots of different sort of options and things like that within the brief. But you could tell that they had just been looking at the site for too long, and they're like, it all looks great. Just please get me something on planning so I can either build this
something.
Yeah. So they were a little bit more wary of it by the time I got involved. But what was great is hit what they were looking for, as well as in terms of quantum of units. And the canvassing with neighbors was tough, very tough. But we got through that and made lots of little concessions to them, planted roofs, boundary treatments, all those kind of things. And it's a really nice little scheme. It's a little gated development. It was an old MOT garage, so it's almost kind of landlocked. But it's a lovely little gated residential development now, little courtyard in the middle. There was an old marker stone that we've kind of used as a centerpiece in the courtyard. So it's very pretty, actually. I'm very happy with this.
Is it, are they flats or are they little mews houses or?
They're mews houses. So there's 2 flats and the rest are mews houses.
Got you. And these are like 2 bed. How big are these little mews houses?
They're 2 beds. They're small, but they work well.
That's great. I think that's really cool, especially when Crouch Hill is the lovely part of North London, and already it's relatively dense London at a major city. We do need more affordable housing. We do need to increase the supply. So bringing these old, not so much used, kind of MOT garage would be light industrial. Well, light industrial doesn't it have some sort of PD right to it? Would that be considered to be a straightforward thing?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, we did a combination of PD and full planning on that one as well. So everything we got through full or could get through permitted development, we did, and then went back in for full planning on some of the units. So yeah, again, it was just trying to be as clever as possible and not to lump all your proposals into one planning application and then be sitting biting your nails, trying to de-risk it and package it up into as many different ones as possible. At least you get one through, you can start on that, and it doesn't completely kill the project if you get a refusal. You can pivot and repackage it and whatever.
So in terms of, I mean, for your, you must definitely have to work really closely with a good planning consultant.
Absolutely.
I think that seems to be where there's a real synergy in sharing of ideas and knowledge, because the planning consultant's going to discuss whether the scheme could get through the legal system, and then you've got to be able to make it functional, aesthetically pleasing.
Absolutely. It's like a team, you know what I mean? It's one might be the keeper or the striker or whatever metaphors you want to put with it, but we've all got our skill set that we bring, and we all support each other. So having a good planning consultant that gets you, or gets the company and what we're about, and we get what they're about, we basically support each other, and it's great having a feeling of this team that we're approaching it from all these different kind of aspects and bringing our expertise to it. It goes back to what I said earlier about building a strong case, and if you've got these different skill sets, we're all tying in together and showing the merits of your proposal, well, then you're on the right track,
And do you, I mean, I think that's great. And the ability to have an architect and planning consultant team come together, I think, because I've heard some people say, oh, we don't use a planning consultant. Our architect kind of knows enough for what we're trying to do, which is fair enough. Or they say, we definitely use a planning consultant, but for our architect, we kind of like outsource it to, someone in the Far East, because it's kind of straightforward, sketchy stuff, and we don't really. So, but I think, especially when you start to get into we're talking 41 units, we're talking landlocked sites in North London.
Oh, absolutely.
Where things get tricky, you need to have somebody really high skilled, a team come together.
Definitely, yeah. Don't get me wrong. We act as agent on a few planning applications ourselves. So kind of anything above sort of 4 or 5 units, I want to get a planning consultant on board. But we do act as agent on smaller ones. But the more complex it is, the more resistance it might get. Get as much expertise as you can on there and show that all these different facets of the design or the kind of approach have been thought about, have been integrated into the scheme, and it's just showing that it's not one of those what did you call them, weak planning applications, easy win
lazy.
That's the one. It's not one of those ones. It's something that you've really thought about and you've brought the right skill sets together that can demonstrate that. So it's crucial for bigger.
For this COVID-19, how's it affected your business? How have you seen the market so far? Have you seen like few applications from developers? Are they holding back, or are you busier than ever? How's it working out for you?
You know what? I really can't complain. We've been very, very blessed on this. Luckily, because we've got stuff on site, but also stuff at concept and planning stage, haven't seen a significant slowdown, which has been great. So I've noticed that we're getting a lot of inquiries, a lot of new concept and feasibility studies at the moment. So it seems like during the lockdown, I mean, developers being developers, you can't sit still, so you've been looking for that new opportunity. And I'm happy to say we're pretty busy at the moment. Our bigger sites, the one I mentioned in Woking and everything, we have a really good contractor on it. They managed to stay open through the whole thing. They had a few issues with certain trades and stuff like that, but essentially we were able to change their site procedures with social distancing and all that, and we're able to stay open, which is great. So going through the actual lockdown and the initial hit of the pandemic, I'm happy to say we've come through okay, and been, as a result, getting more inquiries and possibly exposure to more clients. So as a business, I really can't complain on that one. I mean, how it's going to impact design in the future. Well, now
That's a good question.
We can have another day's talk about that one, Sam. That's going to be a long one. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what the impact is. I mean, I suppose the immediate one that we can all see is very evident is the impact that that's going to have on the design of our homes. And
yeah,
the way it used to be, you know, you'd be in work from 9 to 6 or whatever, come home and crash on the couch with a box set or something like that. And you know, weekends you might hang around the house as well, but it would become very kind of limited the way houses had been designed, how much time we spend in them. Certainly wasn't prepared for the amount of time we'd be spending in them now, and doubling up as an office, as a gym, childcare, everything else. So that's going to be interesting, the impact on that. And I've read a lot of interesting articles recently. I've seen some good ones in Dezeen, which is a good online website. And I think one of the really interesting impacts that might come out of this is the position of the kitchen. So, you know, the way open plan living is something we've moved towards a lot in the last years or so, and especially the kitchen kind of being the heart of the home. So this article was talking about how, you know, in a basically a post-corona world, in the pandemic world, that isn't really going to work anymore, where people are just coming in and leaving bags and stuff like that in the same place where food is being prepared.
Right.
It's kind of like the kitchen needs to not essentially go to the back of the house again, but be treated more as the engine of the house rather than the heart of the house again, you know? So there might be more of a separation in that respect. I think open plan living, again, it was heralded as the greatest thing ever. And don't get me wrong, I do really like open plan living. But I think what this has shown is that we need a bit of privacy as well. We need those quiet corners, those places where you can get away and have that bit of solitude for a while, whether it's to study or whatever, get away from the family because they're driving you mad, whatever it might be. So I think we'll see a little bit of move away from open plan and a little bit more into privacy and multifunctional spaces, you know, something that can double up as a living room, somewhere where you can easily store your gym mat or whatever it is when you need to do your workout. So flexibility, I think, is key. And then also understanding that we need a little bit of solitude as well, you know?
Yeah,
we need a bit of time for ourselves. So I think that will filter through slowly, because that's more of a design approach. I think what will probably be more immediate is minimum space standards and amenity space. I think the government will be under pressure to look at that. So we'll see how that one comes out.
Do you think that because right now the minimum space standards for 1 bed, 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds, etc. Do you think that there's a possibility that could increase to start to encourage developers to create like you say a small box room, you know, which normally people would think, and that box room could be used as a studio or as a nursery, as a study area. And if that was the case and they did something like that, then obviously developers would be able to get less units out of each of the schemes, because they'd have to create. So if they're creating less units, that will put a downward pressure on land prices, where these vendors are going to be forced to sell for less, because no one's going to buy their site for as much because they can't get as much.
Yeah, exactly. And you're absolutely right. It has a knock-on effect the whole way through the chain, doesn't it? So there probably won't be any knee-jerk reaction to this, because there's obviously a lot of lobbying groups involved. And, you know, there's been changes to minimum space standards kind of recently. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that's something that will possibly be looked at, but maybe it's more of a case of, I think, amenity of space, access to parks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So more of an urban planning emphasis, I think it will come from that point. And possibly as far as storage is a key thing that you Mr. Developers will be asked to provide more of. So that allows a bit more of a multifunctional space. So you might have a small unit, but at least you've got plenty of storage, so you can chuck whatever you need in there and then change the functionality of that room, whatever it needs to be. It could be a dining room, a living room, your gym, or even a bedroom, whatever it needs to be. But I think storage is maybe something that you guys might be mandated to do more and more.
My wise old man always tells me, he said, Sam, you know, when you're looking at design and trying to design a space, look at the Scandinavian, the Swedes and the Japanese. They basically have amazing efficiencies in their space and
Yeah.
multifunctional ways of using a room.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're kind of familiar with?
Oh, oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, massive fan of Scandinavian and Japanese design. Yeah, and I think what's really good about their design as well is, yeah, it's understanding that space and the functionality of that space, and how something so simple like, you know, a screen or something that you can just move or slide into place can completely change the flow and the energy of that room. You know, it completely changes it from something that might be a bit more of an entertaining space where you can picture lots of people, and immediately changes it to a kind of private library or something like that, where you can get cozy in a little chair and read a book or what have you. So yeah, Japanese and Scandinavian design, massive for that. Yeah.
Because with all this PD stuff, there was a big move towards micro apartments, those 30
Mm-hmm.
square meter style apartments that are still mortgageable, but below the national space standards you would normally be able to get through a full planning application.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, that was becoming more and more popular. I mean, having lived in Hong Kong as well, living in smaller spaces, I thought, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's an obvious trend. That's an obvious. But since what's happened and everyone's going to be working at home, I think, yeah, it could actually go the opposite way, where these spaces are not very popular because everybody needs that outdoor space. But then, okay, when's the next, you know, pandemic going to be that we're all going to have to stay at home and enjoy our home space? Maybe in the next 100 years. So will it or won't it affect in any great way? I'm not 100% convinced either way. We just need to
Mm-hmm.
see the next 12 months
I
how it
think
plays out.
yeah, absolutely. And I think with the micro units as well, it's the quality of those. So, I mean, floor space is obviously important, and we all want more of it.
Yeah.
But really the quality of that space. So, I mean, you can have fantastic 35 square meter units, you know, that as long as you've got really good outlook, you've got plenty of natural light coming in, good storage, you know, slate circulation, they can become really, really nice units. And I think as well, exactly, you look more at global trends and stuff like that as well. And even just looking around my house here, I know there's tons of crap here I don't need anymore, I can get rid of, you know. So unfortunately, we accumulate a lot of crap in our lifetimes as well. And maybe decluttering is can help a lot on freeing up some more space in the home. But yeah, I think it's quality. I think if we focus too much on areas, that could really harm the potential to create really good, efficient homes that don't need massive amounts of space that are just going to become, you know, kind of redundant. As long as it's got good quality, as I said, lots of storage, adaptability, a bit of flexibility in it, lots of natural light. Yeah, I think a 35 square meter unit can work really well in those. Yeah.
Because I think one thing is important is the space efficiency, but then there's energy efficiency as well. Because if we are going to be, normally everybody, you know, leaves all the lights off and they go and spend time in an office all day where they're using somebody else's energy, then they come back and use the energy. But if we're going to be staying at home the whole time, maybe we're going to be using. So in terms of architecture and materials, is that something that you guys get involved with as well, in terms of the eco efficiency of the home in
Oh
any way?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, that goes back into that kind of functionality side of it as well that we spoke about. And again, I've been reading articles about maybe more touchless tech coming into the home. You know, taps that are operated by the knee and stuff like that. Switches that are just sensor. Maybe that's getting a little bit too commercial. I think, you know, you need a bit of tactile experience at home. You need something that you can feel. So I think if it becomes too sterile, that might kind of detract from that homely feeling that we want, obviously, in our homes. But it is something we have to think about, all right. So yeah, thinking about that next generation of tech that is going to respond to this will be interesting, all right. And that's what's great about all these trade shows. Well, we used to have loads of them, obviously, till everything's been cancelled this year. But you know, we're coming up to London Design Week, and there's plenty of different festivals and exhibitions on, or typically there are, and these are great for going and seeing what the latest products are that are coming out. And I'm sure these will all be back up and running very early next year, because there'll be lots of suppliers who want to show their new new tech and how it's responding to coronavirus.
Really, the final point that I wanted to touch upon is kind of commercial space. The lesser need for it. Already, there's so many companies that I know through friends and colleagues that are not using their commercial space as much as they used to, and these companies are saying we're going to maybe shrink the office space because we're going to have more people working from home. If we had 100 people in the office, maybe we can, have half the size of the office and have 50 in one day and then 50 in another day, that kind of thing. I was thinking, if you're looking at things like Canary Wharf and these tall buildings, it'll be, you can get some really cool residential stuff, high rise in these office buildings. Do you think that that's something that's realistic, or do you think that we'd have to go quite some way before any of those kind of changes were made?
Well, I suppose, we're still trying to really understand what the impact is going to be on office space. So I've seen a few case studies about the 2 meter social distancing rule and what that will do to layouts of not just commercial space, classrooms and restaurants and everything as well. And it essentially halves your occupancy. So whether it's a case of businesses, they've got, half of the week the employees still work from home, but the office is essentially always full, but it'll be at half capacity because that's all you can have in now. So maybe larger companies still need that actual real estate or that floor space because you need more of it now per person. So there's that, but you're absolutely right. If we start to end up with deserted buildings or uses that aren't basically serving a purpose anymore, then they have to be repurposed. So maybe that's the next set of PD rights.
That's what I was thinking. Canary Wharf's going to become a resi block.
Full square meter units now.
Daragh, you know what? I've really, really loved speaking with you. I always enjoy speaking with you. I definitely don't consider you to be a lazy architect. Anyway, incredibly hardworking, hard and smart. How can people reach out to you if they needed your expertise on architecture and planning?
Brilliant. Yeah, you can drop me an email, Daragh, that's DARAGH, at mcl-architecture.com. Our website at www.mcl-architecture.com. If you drop me a line and want to set up a call or chat through your project, very happy to do so. Our initial consultations are free, so very happy to do a Zoom call or something like this. And I think hopefully what I've shown is that sometimes when you're dealing with sites that have constraints in it or difficulties, that can kind of force you to come up with interesting design solutions as well. So if you're dealing with a tricky site, don't give up hope. There's
call Daragh.
Call Daragh. There you go. I should have that little banner running along the bottom here.
You're an absolute star. Thank you so much for your time. I'll make sure that all the contact details are in the show notes below. We'll do this again in 12, 18 months time while we see how all this COVID-19 stuff has affected us and what kind of designs you're working on. And we'll definitely speak again.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.